Welcome to Empower, the podcast dedicated to the conversation about women's empowerment and workplace equity in the affordable housing industry. I'm Nicole Graham, and together with my co-host, Tanya Dempsey, we invite you to join us on this journey to explore, enlighten, and inspire. Each episode of Empower is more than just a podcast. Honoring its mission to amplify voices, Empower is a platform where voices are heard, stories are shared, and change is ignited. We delve deep into the challenges, triumphs, and innovations in affordable housing through the lens of women's experiences and leadership.
Our guests are changemakers, trailblazers, and thought leaders who bring a wealth of knowledge, experience, and passion. From policymakers to community advocates, from industry veterans to newcomers making waves, we bring you candid conversations that uncover real stories behind affordable housing. Our goal is that by empowering women in the affordable housing sector, we are not just building homes, we're building a movement. So whether you're a professional in the field, someone who's passionate about social change, or just curious to learn more, Empower is your go-to source for insights, inspiration, and inclusive dialogue.
Welcome back to Empower, a podcast where we delve into the inspiring journeys of phenomenal women who are shaping the affordable housing sector. I'm your host, Tanya Dempsey, joined by my incredible co-host, Ashley Norcutt from the Women's Affordable Housing Network, and Nicole Graham, my co-CEO at CSG Advisors.
Today, we are thrilled to welcome a woman who has truly made her mark across all sectors of this industry. Lopa began her career in international development, working in several countries across the Middle East and Asia, before transitioning to affordable housing, community, and economic development stateside. Lopa Kolluri has contributed significantly, both as a developer and now in the banking sector. Currently serving as the Senior Vice President at M&T Bank, she has an extensive background that includes being at the helm of the Federal Housing Administration at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, we all know HUD, where she oversaw $1.2 trillion in insured mortgages and led a formidable team of 2,800 employees. Her career also includes pivotal roles at Penrose and the Philadelphia Housing Authority. Lopa's journey through executive-level positions in both the public and private sectors has equipped her with a deep and broad perspective on public and multifamily housing. She began her illustrious career focusing on various homeownership issues at the Fannie Mae Foundation, tackling topics like anti-predatory lending, housing counseling, and homebuyer education. Today, we are super excited to dive into another quality conversation with our co-hosts about Lopa's multifaceted career journey, uncover what inspires her, discuss the challenges she faces in today's economic landscape, and learn how she navigates these hurdles. Welcome so much, Lopa, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It is great to be here. Thank you for having me.
The honor is ours.
All right, so let's just jump in. So Nicole gave such an amazing overview of your background, but really kind of tell us your story. What makes you tick?
So, it's interesting. I was thinking this morning about how I might describe my story in one word, right? And, the word that I came up with was migration. It's probably the best description of my story. So I'll start out by saying my parents were born in East Africa and they lived across 4 continents during the course of their lifetime. By the time I was 18, I had traveled pretty extensively and lived in a number of different places. I attended 8 different schools growing up, right? So as a result of my parents wanting to build a life in the West, we moved from place to place. And those moves were really hard for me. I mean, I was a naturally introverted person. I dreaded changing schools, which I had to do every 2 years. And moving meant navigating a new environment, new school, new friends. And so that was a real challenge for me. But the one constant was home, and not physical because I was, moving all over, but, wherever we went, no matter whether we lived in an apartment in London or in New Jersey or in Ohio, and later, we bought a house. My parents and my mom in particular kept warm, cozy place for my sisters and me that we called home. So at the end of that crazy school day, which I often had being in all these different schools, I had a place to come home to that made me feel anchored, safe, and secure. And wherever we moved, we built and had community, right? So community for ourselves, whether it was neighbors, we were drawn to many other immigrant families that happened to live near us. And then we also had a very strong tie-in with the local indie community outside of Cleveland, Ohio. And then during our summers, we would spend a lot of time in England, where we had my aunts and uncles who've made their way from East Africa and India into England. And it was interesting because that was my first real exposure to public housing and what we call council housing, right, in London, in the UK. And I can distinctly remember going and staying with my aunt who lived in a public housing development called Stonebridge Park in London, and having to ride up we were riding up the elevators that smelled like smoke and urine, and walking around as quickly as we could to get to the apartment, but opening the door to find 20 or 25 family members just happily chatting and having dinner while my aunt was preparing meals in the kitchen. So again, home, community, a place that we as family felt safe and secure. And so looking back, I mean, these were really the early seeds of my exposure to housing and affordable housing and home. And that's really helped to shape my career.
Absolutely. What a great story and what a great inspiration to have that personal connection. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And it's interesting when we've had guests on and they talk about what got them inspired to be part of affordable housing, you hear different stories of how that works. Emily was on our podcast and she had mentioned that she had gone on like a site visit very early in her career. And that's kind of what inspired her. And, I think of all of these other folks who really were drawn to service as a way that they were introduced to affordable housing. But I love the fact that you remember that it was public housing. So good for you to have even acknowledged that it was public housing. Did you know that as a child? Or was that something that you discovered later on in life?
I didn't know that it was affordable housing growing up, or public housing, I should say. So when I was describing the things like the elevators or feeling unsafe, I mean, those are kind of in the background. But as soon as we got into the space, it was about family and gathering and eating and enjoying our time there. And so it was only looking back several years later, realizing, oh, that was government housing. And it wasn't necessarily as clean, as supported, as safe as if it were private housing. But it was interesting because it was communities of immigrants and living in a space together who were connected, as neighbors and friends. But there certainly was an element of what we see often in public housing, right? Crime and drugs.
But what I love about your description is that contrast between, yes, maybe the housing itself was not as well kept, as well maintained as private housing, but the reality is this is home, and this is home for a family. And it's ultimately about making that place your anchor, just like your family was your anchor, and wherever you were, your mother, your family, made this really warm and supportive home for you. And you saw that even when you traveled to visit your other family members. And it just is such a reminder that when we look at public housing, when we look at subsidized housing, every single unit is comprised of a family or an individual. And those are all just very rich and vibrant homes.
Yes,
exactly.
Nicole, you really hit it on the head. Just encapsulated it really well. And, when I was working internationally, I had the opportunity to travel this was at the beginning of my career, travel to places like South Africa, the Philippines, and Jordan, and was working in the areas of microfinance and housing finance. And really, what we were doing was providing loans and grants to families and individuals to build their own homes. And we had the opportunity to really see how these homes would be built over time, how communities were being created. And it had a really significant impact on me. And so I thought to myself, how can I bring the work that is happening back to the United States, or what lessons can I bring back to the United States, and what impact could I have back home in the same way? And so I was struck by the number of parallels there are between the international development space and the US affordable housing sector. There's so many of the same challenges, but one in particular is low-income families not being able to access conventional or traditional financing system and facing real barriers to getting mortgages or housing loans or microloans to establish business. And so these are the keys to building wealth in low-income communities. And so this has been a professional mission of mine, which has, quite frankly, led me to where I am today.
What an amazing story. I love it.
I love this.
Oh, thank you.
Because Lopa, I mean, I've known you for several years and I've never had this conversation with you. I'm just grateful for you sharing this. Sorry, I'm speechless. Tanya, what were you
Thank you, Nicole. And it's interesting. I've been thinking about this for some time now. And when I saw your questions and, I started to give some thought to how I might have this conversation with you all, I realized I was starting to tie my experiences here with my experiences growing up and realizing that, how folks will say, I don't really have a story. I started to put the pieces together and I'm like, there's actually a story here. And I can really sort of think back and recall moments and times, points in growing up or whether it's in my career internationally that have really shaped my path to where I am today.
And Lopa, you mentioned all the similarities of international low-income housing, right? What was the biggest difference in some of those countries that have much less money than England or United States that you were working in? What was one of the biggest differences? Because I'm always fascinated by how the whole world's trying to solve this same problem.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Ashley, because I think the big difference, and this was actually what I was shocked by when I came to the United States, and I think you'll be shocked by it too, only because we are always fighting as an industry for money and for resources, but the US affordable housing sector is heavily subsidized. And we may not feel that way because we're always looking and searching for more funding to finance affordable housing. But that's not the case overseas at all. You are really working with private grants, private foundations, the traditional financial sector. And so when you're establishing a number of these programs, you're taking in some funding that you may get from a bank, but then you're repaying that funding back to the bank. I mean, programs like the low-income housing tax credit, Section 8, state programs, CDBG, programs that if they were funded at the levels that we want them to be funded, I mean, this is a really robust affordable housing industry that we have in the United States, which we don't have overseas. And in most cases, actually, in many cases in developing countries, you don't even have a sophisticated primary market, housing finance market, let alone a secondary.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. I kind of want to follow in your footsteps right now.
Oh,
no, I actually felt that way.
Career. Yeah.
No, I literally
like an international tour and Lopa can be the tour guide.
Exactly. It sounds great.
Actually, I totally want to do that right now. I'm not even joking. And we'll go back to the story and Lopa. But what if we did an international trip and did sightsee some of these types of projects? It would be really fascinating.
Oh, I would love to take you. And my first trip was actually to South Africa. It was in 1994. Apartheid had just fallen. And I went on a delegation with USAID. And it was about how we were going to build and help support housing finance sector to be able to provide financing to townships who had been traditionally not part of the system at all. And as you can imagine, fascinating, a lot of work ahead of us in that. I didn't get to work on it for very long, but having that initial exposure there and then taking that, experience and working in other areas in Asia was just tremendous.
Yeah. So fast forward to where you are now, which is M&T, right?
Yes.
Another bank, and you're leading the affordable housing platform. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing today and how cool that is?
Oh, thank you. Well, I just moved into a new position, which is the head of affordable housing lending. And
Congratulations.
what that means is a couple of things, I think, which is really exciting for M&T. So M&T has been doing affordable housing, has been financing affordable housing. We have a balance sheet and we've got an off balance sheet shop. And then we've also got a light tech area, but we haven't been doing it in an integrated way. We haven't been doing it. And I think one of the things that we heard and we've been hearing from our clients and from our customers was, we want to be able to have a very seamless experience with the bank, right? We don't have to go to one side of the shop for light tech, go to the other side for the RCC products, and then come to you for, come to the bank for the balance sheet. And so my role is I do oversee the balance sheet for affordable. And so what's exciting about that is for the first time, we will be allocating balance sheet to affordable, which is something that's new. So that's a dedicated line of business within commercial real estate, which focus on affordable housing. So that's the first piece. But then the larger piece is to then work in very close coordination, if not integrated as part of a team, to provide a seamless, efficient delivery of financial products and services and affordable to our clients. And so I'm leading that effort, which is really the execution of the strategy that we're putting together at M&T. So I'm really excited by it.
Yeah, it sounds kind of incredible. So I'm going to shift and ask a totally different kind of question, which is we are the Women's Affordable Housing Network. And as such, you are a woman leader. How has that been for you over the course of your career?
Look, I would say that I have had very fulfilling, rich experiences overseas as well as in the United States. I would say that as a woman and a woman of color, I do think that I've faced my share of challenges in various positions that I've been in. When we talk about women and women of color, I think there's variances, right, in the type of challenges that we as women face, we as women of color face, and then there's just a unique set of challenges that say Black women face and Hispanic women, as well as Asian women. And we all have kind of our own unique set of barriers. But I will say one thing, that I do believe that most women of color are underestimated by society. And for me, throughout my career in the international space and the domestic space, I've had a number of people who have believed in me, who have supported me all along the way. I have had mentors who have stayed with me throughout the career, mentor relationships that I've established very early on in my career, many of whom are actually, I was thinking back in the international field, I had mostly men who are mentors. I had 2 Black men and 2 white men. And so it was interesting. I've had in the domestic space mentors as well, and I'll talk about that in a second. But, I said that I've had a lot of support, but I would say as I look back over the course of my year, there have also been a good number of people that have underestimated me. And quite frankly, I can count those on one hand as well. And so, there are times when I think many women have felt, and I've certainly felt this, unheard, unseen, feeling like there may not be a level playing field. That I have experienced. And I'll give you an example. I was asked to join a leadership position at a company, and I think that the company really wanted a leadership voice, a voice of a woman of color, in a position with the experience and background that I had. And, I felt like I, made a pretty significant contribution in hiring women of color, hiring women of color, helping to really build out the company's vision, serving as a leader. But I think there was a limit to how far I could go. I wasn't able to get that full seat at the table. I saw opportunities that were being provided to others around me. And look, it may be an unconscious bias, but while I was there, I certainly made inroads. I built trust and relationships with my colleagues. I have the deepest respect for the people that are there and who I'm in close touch with today. But, I just wasn't able to get into that full leadership position that I thought that I had earned. And so, you have experiences like that. And then you have experiences where, you have a woman who brought me in to a company and was there to support me, had my back all along the way. We had very open conversations about, where I was headed and where I was going. And, I ended up in a place where I felt like I wanted to be based on the support that I got along the way. So, varied experiences, but certainly I think it's much more challenging for women in general and for women in color.
And how do you pivot from that? I love this story so much because one, I think everyone has kind of felt that where you're doing the best that you can and you think you're totally rocking it and you think you deserve that seat. And someone comes along and is like, just kidding, that seat's for somebody else. Or even they might not say that, but that's kind of how they make you feel or how you're interpreting that situation. And so how do you pivot from taking the blame and thinking to yourself, like, it's got to be me, I need to do something different, to saying, actually, it's not me, it's you. It's 100% you. And I'm going to go find, it's kind of like a boyfriend, right? You're kind of like, wait, why would I stay and have to prove to you that I'm awesome when someone else out there will already think that I'm awesome? What's that tipping point for you?
Yeah, I think that it is a pivot, right? You realize that, I've hit a ceiling, right? I've hit my limit here and I've got to look at other opportunities. And that's exactly what I did. And it's unfortunate that we have to kind of get to that point, or because I actually talked to folks from that place. It's like, oh, we lost you, or what could we have done to keep you? And kind of after the fact. But in the end, I think that I went on to a new place where I was able to grow and continue to build my skill set and continue to make the impact that I wanted to in the affordable housing sector. And so that was what was important for me.
I would just want to circle back and like hug what you just said, because so many times just listening to you speak, you can tell your power and your intelligence. And so many times I feel like women, especially when they do make that choice to leave, later hear from so many people at the company, clients, whoever might have interacted with them, that, wow, now that you're gone, we see what you do. So I love that you had that experience, because I think that's very common. And it's, you kind of try and let it go, but it still feels good to hear that once you had to make that decision.
Yes. And you're right. I think it is very common. You feel like you're kind of alone out there, and then you begin to talk with folks and you realize it is common, unfortunately.
Yeah. And my question, Lopa, as I was listening to it, because I agree that it's very common, and probably everyone who listens to this podcast has had an experience like that, unfortunately, where they, have had to make that choice at some point that, like, oh, not only was it like not me, I've worked this hard, and basically it wouldn't have mattered. There's nothing really that I could have done differently. So like having that feeling of like, God, why did I work so hard? There was no way they were going to give me that promotion or whatever it was anyway. And so my question is, what lessons did you learn from that experience?
The biggest lesson I learned was that I probably should have gone into the position and had very clear discussion, conversation about what my growth would look like at the company. And I think I would advise others to really have that conversation. I mean, I had a general conversation, I was excited to be moving into a leadership position. And so I do think, though, it's important to talk about specifics from the outset. Look, I think that the world has changed significantly, right? Post-pandemic, post-George Floyd. I do think the workplace is a kinder, gentler, sort of more supportive place for women and women of color in general. I see the generation of millennials and Gen Zers who are kind of navigating it in a way, in many ways, and much better than, we in the Gen Y did, right, or are doing. And I'm quite frankly really impressed by that. But having said that, I still see the same barriers that are there that can thwart our career growth. So I would say it is important to have those conversations early on, and not just to have them early on, but to keep checking in on those conversations and not assume that things are going to pan out the way you initially said it was going to pan out, but to keep checked in. And I think it's important to make sure that you have your performance reviews done. It's easy for companies sometimes to just, everyone gets so busy and not just on a yearly basis, right? I mean, as I said, now I've been overseeing and managing folks from the millennial generation, and folks are looking for more real-time feedback. They're looking for constructive criticism and how they can do better and where they're going to go next. And And I think those were the questions I did not ask. And I think it is important to have those conversations and don't feel bad about asking those questions, which is kind of what we do as women, right?
Yes.
And Lopa, I think too, praise to you, and some kudos to you, because you are saying the younger generation is handling it better than most of us did, especially women of color. However, they also have people like you to look up to. And there's a safety net there knowing I can get there. I can do this because there's people that look like everyone now moving towards the top. So thank you too for your pioneering in that space.
And Ashley, I would add to that is that I think what you have now is, we're fortunate enough to have at my company at M&T, we've got robust and formalized DEI initiatives, mentorship programs, coaching circles. And if you don't have them at your company, we are in an industry that has numerous trade associations that are focused on those efforts. And there are resources out there, right, to help guide us in areas of our careers. And I do think, and you mentioned this, I do think it's important to seek out mentors, whether it's women or women of color. I think it's important that you seek out mentors that share, similar values, that you make a connection with them, that they are really genuinely invested in supporting your career growth. As I said, I have had several of those mentors, many of whom have been men. But I will say mid-career, I had a mentor, or have a mentor still, a woman of color. Her name was Estelle Richmond. You all may or may know of her. She was the former Secretary of Human Services of Pennsylvania Human Services Department under Governor Ed Rendell. She was also the Deputy Secretary at HUD during my time in the Obama administration, and she had actually hired me. And I've been fortunate to be her mentee for more than a decade now. She saw my potential. She, opened doors for me. We both moved back to Philly at the same time from DC. She helped me transition into Philly, explore opportunities there. And she's been my mentor, coach, and quite frankly, a friend for life. So if you can get one of those, it's been amazing.
Yeah, I think mentorship is a thing, and you need people that can help guide you that have lived through it. So I think you're right. I think it's great that you have a mentor. I'm assuming that you have mentees. But yeah, no, I think mentorship is a great way to help promote other women and other women of color. It's probably the driving reason why we want to be part of the Women's Affordable Housing Network, to help kind of foster that among other women.
Yeah, and I think just a quick note about mentorship. I think what's changed over the years is, we've been doing it for decades very informally. And I think that doing it more formally, I know it's another project, right, that we're working on, right? Another mentee. And the nice thing is, I do have a few mentees who are from the Gen Z and millennial generation who hold me accountable, right? Which is great. So I do think that program or that mentorship has evolved quite a bit.
I just have to give a quick wand plug here because it's so appropriate, but we're launching a national mentorship program in October and already have paired up 10 pairs across the country, thanks to Maya Cooper, Woda Cooper Companies. So it's pretty neat because Lopa, like you just said on accountability, I think it's interesting because it seems that it should be the mentee that is reaching out, scheduling the calls and doing things like that, because the mentor is typically more, I would say, busy, have more seasons, have more things on their plate. So I think that accountability is interesting. And Maya built it out where there's it's 6-month program, there's tracking, there's suggested topics for each one. And then we're going to celebrate it each year at the summit. So it's phenomenal. We can't wait to release it. But I think you're right, that formal networking, and it opens so many doors. Like one thing we haven't talked about is just the connections that your mentor has that they make for you that then opens your world even more. So that's amazing. And I'm so glad you're a mentor too.
Oh, thank you. And congratulations on the program. That sounds really exciting. I think that we just have to continue. We're starting to do this better as women and women of color. We need to just continue to support each other. I think we've gotten better at it. Your podcast obviously is a great example of that. We need to give each other platform exposure, whether it's industry events or conferences or webinars or panels. But I think important is we've got to, as employers, as women of color in, leadership positions, or women and women of color, I should say, we need to hire people who share our values of work and home, We need to build consensus and relationships because we know that no single person has the answer. We need to help people, women who are coming through, who are building their careers, to find their voice. And if we see that someone is feeling invisible or unseen, then it's our responsibility to encourage them to speak up and to work from their strengths. And we need to value what each of them can bring, uniquely to their work. So, and not everyone has the same skills. And we've got to build teams that bring people with different strengths and perspectives to the table. So I think as we continue to formalize these programs, I think you're just going to get deeper and richer and more robust and really supporting, the career growth of women and women of color across our industry.
Well, on that note, thank you so much for your time today and joining us on this podcast.
Thank you so much to you all for having me. It's been wonderful to speak with you.
One last thing. If there was a favorite food that you had on your deserted island where calories don't count, what would that food be?
I'm so boring, but it's pizza. I could eat pizza every single day. My husband's always laughing at me. He's like, "Are we getting pizza again tonight?" I'm like, "Yes, we can have pizza."
Okay, what type?
I would say just pepperoni pizza.
Oh my God, that is like, I was going to say, okay, maybe it's like goat cheese and
no.
Caramelized onions.
Right. Yes, it's a little much.
Yeah, I would just go, Tanya, this is the Ohio in me, right? I mean, just plain old pepperoni pizza. I don't need any of the fancy, flatbread, artisan, I like that stuff too, but just because we go for good old pizza.
Since you've traveled the world though, where's the best pizza you've ever had?
Oh, that's actually a good question. I mean, so I've traveled the world, most of the developing world for work, but then obviously don't travel for pleasure. And I actually think the best pizza I've had is in Italy, which I think most folks would agree.
Okay.
And Lopa, last pizza question. Do you have a pizza oven?
I don't. We're going to get one, Nicole. We're getting one. My husband has promised me that we're going to get one. And
okay. Should we send him a reminder?
Oh, yes, we're definitely going to send him a reminder.
Absolutely.
Because I think you need that in your life. Okay. All right. Well, Lopa, you are a complete badass. So
agreed.
So much for joining. I really appreciate you sharing about yourself and your story and journey.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all for doing this. This is just so important. It's, a podcast like this, I know impacts the lives of so many women. So thank you.